Hi everyone, it's Brett. I have decided to make a level in Super Mario Maker and see how long it takes me. Alright, first is to get some inspiration on how long I should take making a level. So I'm going to talk about how long it took to develop some games. I know I'm just making a level, but I want to look at the bigger picture. The time frame of the making of a game can be a bit hard to pinpoint sometimes, so I will mostly be giving a rough estimate. Also, I will bring up pre-production stuff sometimes. However, the history of pre-production of game development can be a bit harder to pinpoint sometimes. So I'll pretty much only be counting development time after pre-production. I'm trying to keep a somewhat level playing field here. With that being said, it's now time to look back at the past. Tennis for Two took roughly 2 or 3 weeks to be created. It was also made in 1958 and is considered one of the first video games. So in other words, it was made before a multitude of other games. It was also designed to use a circular screen, which a multitude of games afterwards would not do. Pac-Man would start development somewhere in the beginning of 1979. The game reportedly took roughly a year and a half to complete, with it releasing to arcades in 1980. Back then, around a year and a half was a long time to develop a game. Development time would tend to be faster than that. I would hardly consider more development time was a bad thing for this game though. Pac-Man was a major success. The Legend of Zelda began development somewhere in 1984, and sometime later in the year, Super Mario Bros. Would go into development at the same time as Zelda, with seemingly most of the same people working on both. Super Mario Bros. Would release before Zelda in September 1985, which could mean that Mario was developed in possibly less than a year. The Legend of Zelda would release in early 1986, which would probably mean it would have been in development for over more than a year. The fact that these two games would be developed at the same time for a while makes the waters a little murky. Maybe more time was devoted to making Mario rather than Zelda, or it could have been the opposite. It would be interesting to know how long it took if both were made at separate times. This is part of what makes these two games so interesting. They share similar parts and are uniquely intertwined. I believe that the development time is very impressive for both of these games. Maybe one of these days Nintendo will develop 10 games at the same time with the same team. Those might be some high expectations. Super Metroid started to be worked on around 1991. The schedule was said to be tight. During the end portions of development, they would sleep at the office, and at least some of the developers even worked on Christmas night. Also, Yamamoto, one of the developers, was riding his bike home from work when the opening theme of Super Metroid popped in his mind. He would then stop his commute and record the tune with his voice. After all that work, development would wrap up in early 1994. The game would release later in the year, and so Super Metroid was made in around 2.5 years. Super Mario 64 is one of the original 3D games, which sounds like development for it would take a substantial amount of time. Work started on the game somewhere in 1993. The first year was said to be focused on just working on the design aspect of the game. After that, Nintendo seemed to have got into working on the software development of the game. Reportedly starting on September 7th, 1994 and ending on May 20th, 1996. The original release date was reportedly Christmas 1995, but Miyamoto asked for more time, which ultimately made the game release in the summer of 1996. So Super Mario 64 took about 20 months to develop. Well, for this being one of the first fully 3D games, that really wasn't a substantial amount of time. Super Smash Bros. Melee was made in an almost unrealistic amount of time in my opinion. The design or proposal document was apparently made around July 1999 by Masahiro Sakurai. The project would start production somewhere around fall of 2000 and wrap up development in just 13 months. The game was not low on content though. There was over double the amount of characters from the last game, some of which were clones of other characters, which makes sense with the amount of time that was taken. Sakurai spent a lot of time working on this game in order to get it out as fast as he did. He was taking short weekends and wouldn't take holiday breaks. Sakurai would call his lifestyle during this time frame as destructive. It's fair to say that Super Smash Bros. Melee was rushed, so it did have quite a few unintended features. Or glitches. Also, some bits of content seems to show signs of a short development. However, the game has many good aspects and is a step above the original, even though the development time was lacking. Duke Nukem Forever started development in 1996 and ended development in 2011. That is over 14 years of development. I'll say it right now before I can't say it anymore. That is over half my age. What would warrant this much time? Well, to name a couple things, there was multiple changes for the game engine the team was using, and the staff was somewhere around 18 or so, with people leaving the project over time. That amount of people was fine when it first started development, but as time went on, other teams would start to have more people, so this was just a sign that they were falling behind. When the game finally released on June 10th, 2011, the game earned a large portion of bad reviews. Sometimes more development can be a bad thing. During that time span, it might have looked like the game would be in development forever, but hey, at least it looked like they might have stayed true to the name of the game. Minecraft started development in 2009, and the first version of the game was said to be made in only 6 days. The game would get updates and would first be playable by the public on May 17th, 2009. The considered full version wouldn't release until November 18th, 2011. So around 2.5 years of development. Minecraft would continue to keep on updating though. In fact, Minecraft has actually continued to get updates 10 plus years later after its official release. So the question is, when did Minecraft end development? At this point in time, the definitive end date of Minecraft's development is unknown, and seems to show no signs of stopping. I guess it could go from 6 days of development to 6 decades of development. Call of Duty is one game series that is known for having a pretty consistent development time, and also has so many games to choose from. I'll pick Infinite Warfare because I noticed it exists. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare started development around 2014 and would release in late 2016, so it seemed to be developed for about 3 years. A Call of Duty game usually takes roughly 3 years to make, but sometimes it can be shorter. The games have mostly come out every year, so the math is not adding up. I used to think that Call of Duty was made in just a year, but that's before I knew that the games were made by multiple studios. So they are kind of tag teaming, except they all have to make these games pretty much non-stop. It seems like quite a high demand to be pumping these out every year, even with all these teams. That's one way to have fast, consistent releases. Anyway, this game would also get updates like Minecraft, but Infinite Warfare would instead finish getting updates in 2017, therefore beating Minecraft in shorter update development time by a landslide. So development was pushing close to 4 years, I guess. So when does a game really end development? I would like to consider a game to be finished when it releases, but it just doesn't seem like that is the case sometimes. Whether that's because there were issues fixed after release, or adding more content after release. This makes me think about the fact that Super Mario 64 ended up getting at least one updated version for itself on the cartridge to change some things. So that game could have technically been declared to still be in development. Also, Super Smash Bros. Melee had an updated version. And in case Duke Nukem Forever wasn't in development long enough, it would get some updates. So should the little fixes after a game releases count as development? Should the adding of more content be considered separated from the game's original development? You know what? I have decided that I'll just keep counting the updates as development time, and I am not going to try to analyze the end of a game's development too much. Moving on. Hungry Night was made in 2013 in under 3 days. First, wow, that's impressive. Second, why would people make a game in this time span? Well, the main answer comes from something called a game jam. Essentially, a game jam is an event where people often get a short set amount of time to make a game, usually with a theme to follow. This is a very great way to show that there doesn't have to be a whole bunch of time to make a game. It's neat to see what people come up with for these events. Then the team that worked on Hungry Night later began development on Hollow Knight, somewhere in the middle of 2014, also in a game jam. The game used the same character from Hungry Night. Hollow Knight also shared some loose similarities to Hungry Night. Other than that, Hollow Knight was very different. The team did not entirely make the deadline for the game jam. However, the project did continue to expand. After around 2.5 more years, the game would then release on February 24th, 2017, and continue to release to other platforms up until September 2018. The game would also get updates around this time, ending with the final update on August 2018. Well, actually, Hollow Knight Silksong was first intended to be an update for Hollow Knight, but was then developed as a standalone game instead. This is why I'm not analyzing the end of development too much. Anyway, if I did the math right, Hollow Knight took at least 2 times longer to make than Hungry Night. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild's concept was formed sometime in 2011. Production would begin sometime in January 2013. Then the game would eventually be advertised to release in 2015, but was delayed. It would then plan to release in 2016. It would then get delayed again, and would eventually release on March 3rd, 2017. So it was made in around 4 years. Now it could have been faster, but instead they worked on it longer, and I think that was the right call. Taking the time to refine the game and make it more fleshed out made it into the incredible game it is. Then it got some updates. The extra content was announced just a little while after development finished for the base game. It also got some minor updates to fix some stuff, and the last content update released on December 7th, 2017. So, development for Breath of the Wild took roughly over 4.5 years. I'm glad I didn't make bets for the end of development on this game. After looking at all these development times, I'm realizing that time is precious. Some of these people worked an insane amount. The amount of effort and thought that was put into these games is most likely pretty high too. Even though time can easily slip away, people can still make something timeless. I know I could roughly find the amount of time these games were made in, but that doesn't always take into account the amount of hours these people put in during that time. How many hours of work did it truly take to make these games? Not to mention, how do you take into account the reusing of assets from other games, or starting off with a pre-built engine? How much time would some of these games take if they were made completely by scratch? Not to mention, there doesn't even seem to be a clear date for when Super Mario Maker began development. Oh whoops, I forgot about making that level! Alright, so most of these games I looked at took over a year to make. Okay, I don't want to take over a year. I'm just going to instead make this level as fast as possible. Well, it only took me around 8 seconds. I'm gonna test it out.
Let's go!
Yeah, I probably should have put more time into that.